Hello, I'm David Craig Utz, and I want to welcome you back to this week's Unfazed Under Fire. Now, I'm excited today to have a bit of a different flavor on our podcast. I'm here with Justin Grammens. He's a CEO of Lab651, and Lab651 assists business leaders to successfully build and launch their own software products with a proven system they've developed and honed over the years, and through Justin providing a crew of top-tier software development experts and engineers. And in that offering, they provide artificial intelligence services as well. Is that right, Justin?
Yep, that is.
Yeah. Now, I met you at a local networking event here in the Twin Cities where you served on a panel going over kind of the breakthroughs in AI. And after speaking with you a little bit more, it just seemed obvious it would be good to have you on the show. Now, you've done a little bit more than found and lead Lab651. You've done a lot.
Yeah.
You founded Recursive Awesome,
Yes.
IoT and Artificial Intelligence Weekly News. You co-founded AppliedAI and Captovation. But wait, there's more. You're also the creator and producer and host of AppliedAI Podcast. You founded a 501c3 nonprofit called Emerging Technologies North, and you're an adjunct professor at the University of St. Thomas, which is, and you also have a robust personal life. You're married and have kids, right?
Yes,
you're a father.
I do. 2 boys.
So I appreciate you taking the time today and the few minutes you had and in between
sure.
all that to join us. And what I'd love to hear, I just kind of gave you the litany of Justin's background, which is kind of the boring list. I thought I'd love for you to kind of add some color to that and say, how did you get to where you are today, having these being an entrepreneur, opening multiple companies, and really being really steeped in the depth of the deep pool of artificial intelligence? How did that all come about?
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, thanks so much. I really appreciate the opportunity for being on the podcast here, David. And
you're welcome.
And I think what I just love is having great conversations, whether or not it's technology or leadership or whatever it is. I just love getting out and meeting people, and that's one of the things I think probably is sort of a common thread throughout whatever I've been doing. I've always been interested in meeting new people, and I've always been kind of interested in sort of the next thing. Right. And so I was always, excited to jump into building websites back in the 90s when it was just like dial up. I started hosting my own internet radio station out of my apartment, off of like a DSL line when DSL was the new big thing, and there, in the 99 2000 time frame. Right. And then I kind of got into building mobile applications. I got into the Internet of Things, and now very much focused on artificial intelligence and machine learning. And I think, for myself, I went through the program at the University of St. Thomas. I have a master's in software from there. And I'm always sort of interested in kind of continuous learning, right? No matter what it is. And I'm also really big, I think, on communities. So whether or not it was the mobile community that I started back when the iPhone and Android came out, then I started a community around IoT. Now I've started this community over the past 3 years around artificial intelligence and machine learning. And I tell people, if you're passionate about something and you're sort of working in your basement and playing around with stuff, which is what I tinker around in a lot of different things, run that idea up the flagpole, start a meetup, post something on LinkedIn. Hey, I'm looking to get more people together around this particular passion of yours. And I think you'll find more and more people are looking for that. And, who you wouldn't even think would come out of the woodwork, maybe even have even more passion than you. And so I'm really, I guess it's more around being a team player and wanting to pull together a bunch of people to work around technologies or passions that I have over the course of my time. And I guess the byproduct is all those things that you said. Right.
Right.
I'm the CEO of a company. I've started a number of different groups around town, interested in podcasts, teaching, all that sort of stuff.
All right, great. You mentioned community, and you kind of drove by it and made a big emphasis, an exclamation point on that. What have you found? And you did intimate that this is a way for you to get other people to mix into your thinking, potential opportunities emerge out of that, all that kind of thing. But at the core of it, what do you think is so important about community, especially today in the times that we're in right now?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's things changing. At least if we'll focus on artificial intelligence, for example, there's literally
Yeah.
new articles that are coming out every day. And just we just had a conference here last week, the Applied AI
Right.
Spring 2023 conference. And during the kickoff session, I showed a screenshot that was just about a dozen articles of the titles of where AI is being used. And that was just from one day, right? It was everything from AI being used, of course, in the big things around healthcare, around agriculture, around advertising, all those types of things. But it was even around, hey, how can we, there was one article about cannabis, right? And so,
Hmm.
so it's like, how it's literally is being applied and touched everywhere, and no one person's going to know it all. It's just
Yeah.
impossible. So the more people you bring together, the more minds you have in the room, and the more opportunity you have to sort of explore and learn things from each other. And I guess I am also an entrepreneur sort of at heart. And so
Yes.
through
Yes.
these groups, we've actually had companies form,
Yes.
people have met I was happy to sort of be the matchmaker.
Very good. Well, and I wanted to kind of continue down this vein a little bit before we jump into the artificial intelligence, which is the juicy topic that we want to talk about today. But given your focus on starting these companies, and what would you say is your approach to leadership and philosophy around developing and building teams that you say, well, these are the go-to things that I keep in mind when I'm doing that, and this is what has helped me successfully build these companies. If you were to speak off of that a little, riff off that a little bit.
Yeah, sure, sure. That's a great question, and I know that's sort of like maybe where most of your listeners sort of focus on is around leadership. I would say in many ways I'm still learning this.
Yeah.
I'm trying new things out, and I'm still making a lot of mistakes. And I think one thing a good leader needs to do is sort of reflect on things that they've done and realize in hindsight where they maybe could improve in the future. So one thing that I like to try to do, I think, is try and explain the overall goal. And there's a guy named Dan Sullivan. I'm not sure if you're
Hmm.
familiar with
Hmm.
him at all, but he has this thing called an impact filter. And what it does is it's a one sheet, basically tells you explain the purpose, explain the importance, and what an ideal outcome looks like, right? And so I've started using that actually with our team, especially even for the Applied AI conference and stuff like that. There's no way as a leader you can get into the minutia of what your team's going to be doing. It's just A, it's not scalable, and B, you're probably not using your time or your expertise.
Right.
Let the people, the boots on the ground, make those decisions and really set in motion your philosophy and how you want them to act, and where, what the end point or what the winning, like what success looks like, and let them do what they do best. So I'm not a huge fan of micromanaging.
Yeah.
I also really would say don't ask people to do things that you wouldn't do or haven't done yourself, right? And so what I try and do is more or less be a coach or be a mentor
Right.
to them. So listen to the problems that they have, say, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? Rather than say, do this or do that. Try and actually be kind of ride shotgun with them. It's the thing about teach somebody how to fish rather than fish for them. And then
Right.
I think another sort of third tenet, as you were sort of explaining what you were looking for here, was, maybe, and this is where I need to get better at, is maybe try to sympathize that others maybe won't do it the way that I want it done.
Right.
This is very difficult for me to sit back and let people kind of fall on their face, because I've been doing this. I've been building software and technology for 25 years. So
Right.
I know all of the potholes. I know all of the things they're going to run into. But sometimes you just got to let it sit back, because and I've seen it done. People do it their way, and it's actually better. It's actually at the
Right.
end of it, it doesn't need to be done my way. So those are sort of, I guess, some highlights around how I try and run my team and manage the organization.
Well, and I think it's you hear that from all of my clients too. If you develop a high degree of expertise, number one, it's really hard to let go and allow people to make their own mistakes and show you another way. And of course, some of that is informed through your coaching with them and support. Of course, you're supporting them around that. But I
Hmm.
like what you said around that. And then the issue of really setting clear: here's the direction, here's the goal, here's the vision. Now show me what you can do with it in a certain way with some other direction is a great way to go. And I'm also wondering if you've done some thinking about the environment that you create around your offices and around you say that what's the flavor of the culture you try to develop in your businesses, if you were to speak to that a little bit.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's obviously around creativity, right? And certain people are going to work in certain ways with regards to how they can be creative. So at Lab 651, for example, we don't have a you have to come to work policy, right?
Right.
I tell people work the best to wherever you work. So if it's in the office, awesome. If it's not in the office, that's fine too. And so we try and bring people to collaborate together. But if people work better at a coffee shop, I certainly let them do that. One of the things we are doing here at Lab 651, I will. So we just moved into a new office about 2 months ago, and software development in my mind is like going on a journey. It's actually like trying to find treasure. And so what you're
Yeah,
what
that
you're
makes
really
sense.
trying to do, yeah. And so you're
Right.
trying to find that treasure, which is ultimately a product that enters the market that is successful, and that's what our team helps you do. But we're actually we have a whole nautical theme here, right? So a lot of the pictures you see on the walls are about sailing.
Yeah,
We have a big sort
that's
of
a great
wheel
neighborhood.
that's up on the wall. So yeah, so the whole idea is when you come in here, you feel like you're going on this journey together as a team, and in a creative environment where everyone's able to sort of participate in that and work together. And so the more you can reinforce that, I guess that'd be the other thing is words only go so far. So
Yes.
the more you can reinforce that and actually sort of do what you say, I think the more people will really believe you.
Well, that's really important because I think a lot of times what organizations do is they do a lot of work to get the framing of what they want the culture to be, but then it's put up on the wall, and not much else is done differently. So I love hearing that from a leader that now we got to put this on the ground and make this, whether it's the nautical theme or we're talking about the vision or talking about a project we're on, we got to somehow integrate that creative energy in all of that. And how do we do that? You can't do that by talking about it, right?
Right,
Yeah,
right,
yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
great.
yeah, I guess the only thing I was going to say was, that we like probably every other company has a set of core values, right? But what you really want to do is obviously then reward people and actually call them out, saying, okay,
Right.
one of our core values is accountability, right? And so when people step up and they're accountable, you say you have been accountable at this, right? So
Right.
continue to use those words. They're not just things that are sitting out there that no one ever takes a look at. I really try and strive to have people actually use the vocabulary, because then it really starts to sink in around the organization, its culture.
Absolutely. Well, it sounds like you've created quite a robust culture around here, which is great. Well,
Thank you.
let's jump into some of this more the topic that we kind of set on today, and around artificial intelligence, and in my diving into a little bit more research that I know it's not even enough to be dangerous today, but one definition I saw is that it's a science and engineering of making machines with human-like characteristics and how they see the world, they move, play games, and even how they learn. Is that a fair definition, or is that not robust enough?
It's a great question. I mean, it's one of these things that I ask people on my podcast. Everyone who's on my podcast, I say, define AI for me. And I've
Yeah,
got
yeah,
70 episodes and everyone said something different. But
right,
I think what you said there is a fair assessment. I mean, what I would say is, we don't know how the human brain works. And so
right.
we're basically trying to model decisions, using this idea of a neural network based on vast amount of data, and using, fancy math to allow computers to learn. And
Yeah,
that's one of the things that I think is sort of unique that I tell people. When I went through college and I was writing computer programs, there's a series of logic. There's an if then else statement. If you get this input, then behave this way and put this output out. And what we're looking at right now is actually training computers to have a set of probabilities, because that's really more humanistic, right? I look at a painting on the wall. Is that a cat or a dog? And I don't. It's about 90% it's a cat, so the answer is a cat. But you can't code all of that into
yeah,
a computer algorithm. So AI to me is really the task of training computers to learn. And
yeah,
at the moment, I don't think they're any more smarter than humans in my mind.
yeah.
They may appear like they are because they have a vast amount of data, but
Yeah, they consolidated data into an answer that you don't have in your brain necessarily, but it comes from human knowledge ultimately, right?
it does, yeah. And so
Yeah,
I would say, they're no more smarter than us, because by definition we have trained them. Once
right.
they become trained by other things, then maybe they are. But yeah, I'm
Yeah,
not too big on that idea that, and maybe we'll talk a little bit more about that
yeah,
that AI is conscious or whatnot.
right.
But yeah, I know we're trying to mimic humans in some ways.
Well, and the primary purpose of AI is to improve quality of human life, right? To improve capacity of businesses to create value, to make it more, efficient to live and easier, so you can spend your time the way you want to spend your time versus spending your time on menial tasks or whatever, boost intelligence, etc. So, the goal is to help us, right?
Yeah,
that's right. The fundamental goal, right? We have to keep that one foremost in mind. And what most excites you about artificial intelligence and what's possible? Let's say it's, imagine it all goes well. None of the dark stuff happens. We'll talk about that later, so I'll just touch on it. But if it all goes well, and maybe you can imagine, however, 3 years from now, or whatever you want to say, what will life be like when artificial intelligence is fully integrated into our lives? What do you think?
Yeah.
It's a visionary question because we don't know, but what is your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, you touched on a little bit around efficiency, right? And I really like to say, how can we use artificial intelligence to make humans superhuman, right? And not in any good way or bad way per se, but they're freeing us up from the mundane tasks that we maybe aren't so good at, right? And so, some examples which you probably have read about in the news where we have medical imaging happening, right? So there's no way a doctor can find cancer because it's just not possible for the human eye to see that many, X-rays, for example, but yet the AI can, right? So now we're saving lives with that. Things like agriculture, I just don't think I don't think that the human race is going to be able to sustain and support the number of people that are on Earth unless we start using more artificial intelligence with regards to how we grow crops, right? Where we plant them, how do we increase food production, right? Obviously, there's the nice things around productivity where it's like, oh, I wake up in the morning and maybe I have this AI or this bot that has answered all my emails overnight, right? And I truly believe that's going to happen. Where basically I'm going to need to selectively come in and answer things if I need to or not, right? Because back to that leadership thing, hey man, if I could train this thing to answer in such a way, maybe it can handle 90% of my emails or more, right? And so, actually the CEO of Microsoft, Satya Nadella, said that he believes that in the future, everyone will have their own digital assistant to help them. Like, I look at my kids, my 9 and 11-year-old, and I think absolutely within their lifetime, and maybe even next year, people have already started having, AIs that's going to help them. So I see so much more automation happening, things from self-driving trucks, where it's like we can't actually move all of this product around the United States or around the world. There's a huge shortage actually in truck drivers, right? And so in order for us to actually sustain, these are all sort of these things that we need to have happen. So I envision us being a lot more, I guess, productive at the higher level and leaving a lot of the mundane things, the monotonous things that have sort of happened over and over again, to smarter, intelligent machines that will make our lives better.
And on those things, maybe do a better job than we do. Maybe they'll send fewer emails that will trigger people, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
They'll just get to the data. Okay, great. Well, one of the obviously the people that listen to this show are senior executives, and I'm wondering if you see you obviously have seen in your business in Lab651 and maybe there are other businesses how senior executives or companies are deploying AI solutions. Do you see themes that are emerging right now where executives are seeking specifically AI solutions for things? And you probably mentioned some of them or pointed to some of them just a moment ago. I don't want you to be redundant, but let's go into the executive world and see what you see they're thinking about and how they're what ideas they're using and deploying it.
Yeah, and I might have said this at the panel event that you saw me speak at, but I like to tell companies that look across your organization, right, and any place you have tasks where there's humans doing work that are error prone, right? So this is monotonous work that people do over and over that a human is really not so good at, right? And in fact, it may be very detail oriented, and you might have somebody on your team. And most humans aren't detail oriented, right? So what are human tasks or people that are doing over and over that you find a lot of errors in or they're making mistakes in? Number two is an area where you have a lot of data. I mean, these systems are driven off of data. So you either need a lot of images, or you need a lot of text, or you need a lot of spreadsheets, or you need a lot of phone calls, if you're doing sort of an automated phone system. But areas where you have a lot of data, and this is where, I think the internet has been awesome, because it's allowed us over the past, 20 plus years now to collect a lot of data with regards to what's going on within your organization. And then I say, number three, and you don't have to have all three. I would say even if you have 2 out of 3,
Right.
you're doing good. But also, do you have a system or a process that can be followed, that needs to be followed, or that essentially can be trained on, right? And so it's like, if this happens, then this happens. And again, you don't need to write the code to do the if then, but what can happen is the more sort of systematized, or basically if there's a process already in place, the computers are very good at following those. They're very good at knowing what the input is, here's what the output is, and figuring out how it gets from A to B. And so look across your organization anywhere. You might have it in finance, you might have it in support, you might have it in sales, but and I say in a lot of ways, computers and the internet help speed up the way businesses run. Can you imagine having to pick up a phone and call, everyone you emailed today, right? No,
Yeah.
of course not. So the internet helped us that, Can you imagine having to pull out a paper map and get to where you are today? So what's happening now, I feel like, is the next layer is now happening, where it's not only we can get this information, because now we've crossed that. The internet has allowed us to share this information. Now we're putting intelligence on top of it. And those sort of 3 areas where there's human and error prone stuff, you have a lot of data, or you have a system or a process that needs to be followed, that's a prime candidate for where you should be looking at AI.
Right, great. Well, I'm wondering also, you talked about efficiencies in systems, to reduce that, to improve the task, et cetera, and the 3 areas you mentioned. Are there applications in revenue generation and customer experience, and where do you see solutions that are emerging for in those areas that would actually help a sales force qualify leads, or help a sales team get to better manage their schedule for appointments, or to help with the customer experience in some way?
Yeah. So if you pick on sales, yeah, absolutely. I mean, and a lot of this data, again, it's there. It just needs to be sort of combed over with regards to behavior
Right.
patterns, purchase history, sales forecasting, right? Based on historical sales and market trends. One of the things, so you mentioned one of my startups is a company that I co-founded called Captovation, and it's all around presentation skills. So we're actually using, and this sort of spans a number of different areas, but we're actually using computer vision to look at people as they present, and it can give them feedback. Hey, what sort of words are you using? Are you using words that are inspirational? What's the tone or pitch of your voice? Are you using hand gestures when you talk, right? All that type of stuff. It's both not only the visual components, but also then the words that you're saying. And are you saying a lot of ums and ahs? Are you speaking too fast, too slow? All that type of stuff. So it can be a great, again, this is where AI can essentially be a coach to you, no matter what you're trying to do. If you're a customer, if you're working in customer experience, for example, is there, are there certain base level questions that can just be automatically answered by virtual assistants? Yes, there are, and people are deploying those, all over the place. Our system could be used for HR resume screening and sort of candidate matching. So imagine, and in fact, I know a lot of companies are actually doing this already. The first interview is not actually with a human anymore. The first interview is actually with, you open up the Zoom call and a bot asks you the questions and you answer it. And then it ends up basically taking a look at what you did and how you answered them. And you may or may not have made it to the next level.
Made it through that bot.
Exactly. Yeah. And we can talk about if that's good or bad, right? With regards to the ethical side.
Yeah. Well, it depends. Yeah, it depends on the situation and everything like that. But I mean, it certainly can be an effective way to get through a big candidate pool for sure.
Yeah. And the one thing that I was going to mention was security, like cybersecurity, right? That is huge. And there's so much data. There's so many people out there that are trying to hack into other systems. And that's another place where just a human cannot do that. There's too much information. So cybersecurity and AI is another big area where I see executives looking at, or CIOs in a lot of those cases, right?
Well, I would imagine the hackers may be taking advantage of the AI as well, so you probably have to have a combative, the other side of it, right? I mean,
you do.
You have to do that, yeah. Well, and are there particular functions you see in an organization that are more? I mean, all those touch all functions, but are you seeing you have predominance of there's more finance solutions, more sales solutions, more HR solutions, or it's a mix. And I would say it's higher in this percentage. I'm just curious if you would say in a functional way where you're seeing more of the AI being deployed right now.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think people are trying everything, right? And with the advent of ChatGPT, there's all these things. Well, what happens if I throw stuff at it, right? And so
Right.
the things that are always going to come to fruition are where can we see the quickest return on investment, right? Where can we spend the least amount of money and now all of a sudden be able to actually generate some potential return on investment? And so I would say anything related to finance, definitely allowing people to do, additional forecasting and revenue expenses, and actually around sales and marketing and finance, all coming together. What you see is with ChatGPT is you don't need a copywriter, for a lot of the baseline sort of stuff. When you go to write ads or you go to write new blog posts, I would say so much of this data is being generated now by these large language models that it's literally costs pennies for you just to run experiments. And so I talk to companies and coach them on where can we run a quick experiment where we can use an over-the-counter or some sort of off-the-shelf solution like an OpenAI or like a ChatGPT, for example, and try out some of these things for the least amount. And so, like, where in particular, I wouldn't pinpoint one versus the other, but I think people are looking at back office systems. How can they automate this exchange of data back and forth where they're paying a lot of people, especially customer support, for example, paying a lot of people to do mundane tasks, and they're trying to pick out the low-hanging fruit right now.
That's great. What are the things if you, as I don't know how prevalent AI is being baked into other technology and software companies out there. I'm sure they're all trying to get into the game. So as an executive, you're looking at all the potential vendors you may be working with. What kinds of things should you be thinking about when you're choosing a vendor for your AI vendor? In other words,
Yeah.
Obviously, if you had a relationship with somebody, you might just give them a shot. They say they can do it. That's one way to do it. But if you're simply saying, here's the 3 or 4 things, if I was an executive, I would be keeping in mind and really honing in my questioning of potential vendors when I'm talking to them.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean it's like making any purchase decision, right? You want to go through a series of it ultimately comes down to trust, obviously.
Right.
And so, I guess one of the first things that I would say is, are you looking to buy or build? Right? Those are two different types of skill sets. Those are two different types of pricing models. And the first thing you want to do is talk with companies and find out which sort of business are they in. Do they align with your goal of saying, hey, can we bring in something off the shelf to quickly sort of build it, or to basically buy it, something off the shelf, or are we a custom shop where we want to completely build everything from scratch? And at Lab651, we are a custom software development shop. That is where we ultimately end up. But what I would say is I am a huge fan of looking at existing technology that's
Right.
there and creating a minimum viable product, right? And so work with companies that really want to focus on getting you just to an MVP, right? And
Right.
what you really want to do is work with them to set up a series of experiments. I'm actually reading a book right now called Idea Flow, which is actually written by 2 guys that started the Stanford D School, which is this very famous design school. And what they are really pushing, and what I totally agree in, and this works in any new technology, is try and set up the smallest and cheapest experiments that you can. And the winner in this space is really are going to be the companies that do as many experiments and fail the most, right? It's the story
Exactly.
it's the story of Edison failing 1,000 times before he finally got the light bulb to work, right? And so failure is okay. You just want to make sure you do it quickly and you do it cheaply. So look for companies that are not going to come in and say, okay, this is going to be $1 million
Right.
project, and we're going
Exactly.
to deliver something in 12 months, for example, because quite frankly, this space is changing so fast. In fact,
So
if you set your sail and you want to head this way, it's going to change. Believe me, it's going to change. So you need to be able to be nimble and work with companies that can be nimble. Understand full well that a lot of them probably haven't solved your specific problem, but ask
Right.
them about how they solved something that was tangential to it. How have they used computer, like, for example, with my company, we're using computer vision in a very specific way. So I'm really, really good at sentiment analysis and figuring out how people are working and doing presentations in front of the camera. However, I can use that exact same knowledge that I've done to work with a company doing quality assurance on an assembly line to making sure that the product that's coming across the line is actually, doesn't have any defects in it, right? Because I know computer vision really well. So yeah, talk to people and find out sort of what their core skill sets are and see if it applies to what you're trying to do. And ask a lot of questions and see if you can even get them to work with you, have some conversations before you even, kind of do a try before you buy.
That's right. That sounds great. Well, and maybe you could share, like, I like you started intimating it, but you shared a little bit of some stories. One of your favorite stories of how you went in and helped the business apply AI to solve its problems. I don't know, you probably have a million of them, but whatever comes to mind that an example of a problem that the company had was a pretty steep, maybe it was a steep slope to them, or they felt they didn't know how to figure it, and you came in and provided an AI solution that moved them forward.
Yeah. Well, yeah, there are quite a few. Yeah. And I would say, so my background historically at Lab651 is we've been doing a lot of stuff in the Internet of Things, right? We've been actually capturing data from equipment that is out in the field. And sort of the gold standard, a lot of this is trying to understand and figure out how things are before they fail, right? It's this sort of preventative maintenance, aspect to it. So what we have done, we worked with a company that does paint mixing. They actually have paint mixers out in the field, and they have no idea, they have no visibility into these things when they fail. And these are paint mixers that are at Lowe's and Home Depot, for example. And so if you go in there and you go to buy a gallon of paint and the paint mixer is broken, they're losing money, right?
Right.
And so, I work a lot with companies that are, they have equipment that can't really have any sort of downtime. So we worked with them on a connected product that now we got their data. It's coming across over a cellular connection, and now they can see real-time charts and graphs how things are working, and if they are working. And now they have a lot more visibility when it needs to go in and be just serviced, for example, so they know the right parts that they need to bring before it goes down. B, they can actually understand how their products are functioning, so they can make a better product in the future, their next rev of their products. And then C, now the companies that they're selling to, Lowe's and Home Depot, now basically have in a sense an insurance policy, right? They know that this company is now servicing them because it's being tracked and monitored in real time. And so these guys are able to see a lot of information that they were never able to see before in the past. And it's all of this data then that gets created into a predictive model. So there's one side there around like the sensors side. I just want to give you other quick example here too.
Sure, please.
Especially around conversational AI, around this whole idea of chatting. So we're working with a company right now that has 10,000. It's a company that deals with auto parts. So they have 10,000 parts in this catalog.
Wow.
And it's a very cumbersome aspect to search for certain things, right? And so imagine if you could just type in, I have a 2010 Ford Mustang, tell me all the stuff that I need to get for it, right? What are the headlights for this, right? And so instead of having to actually dig through either
a
big catalog of things and have drop-down menus and select what you're going to have, this is a perfect example of there's a lot of data there, and it just feels so much more natural. And this is what I think the future of searching for things is going to be like. It's going to be like you just ask questions and dive in a little bit more deeply. And this is where the AIs are getting really good with regards to having contextual, experience in it. So that's another example where we're using sort of, natural language processing across a lot of data, words, but allowing it to be more of a conversational tone rather than trying to hunt and peck and find stuff.
Yeah, I mean, you used a ChatGPT or something like that. You're amazed at what can come up and how you can get a framework of a proposal together. I mean, I use it for things like that where it saves me like 45 minutes or 2 hours even on developing those kinds of things. And being able to have a catalog like that accessible to your customers or to yourself to find something quickly is great. It's a great idea.
Yeah.
Great thought. Well, I appreciate all that context. I want to, touch on this kind of darker side surrounding AI. I mean, depending on who you listen to, right? And
Yeah.
especially in recent reads. And I start with one of my favorite quotes. It was before I even thought about doing this podcast. It was always ringing around in my head because I saw technology advancing. And there was Edward Wilson, who was an American sociologist, said the real problem with humanity is the following. We have Paleolithic emotions, medieval institutions, and godlike technology, and that's a challenge to us. And that seems to bleed into this concern that Elon Musk and Max Tegmark from MIT and Steve Wozniak, who's of course the co-founder of Apple, did when they signed that letter demanding a 6-month moratorium. But they specifically on large transformational AI projects. And then I saw a video of Jeffrey Hinton, who was at Google and was, I guess, I don't know if you consider it, they tagged him the godfather of AI. I don't know what these names read. And he recently left Google so he could have an unfiltered expression of his concerns, which he said, I didn't really have them until I think it was ChatGPT or 4 came along. And then something changed for him that he felt that this could be dangerous for the human race. So, I know that those are concerns that are being raised by a lot of people that, have some validity in who they are.
Yeah.
And to me, the concern seems to be more on there's nobody minding the shop. I think Elon Musk said it's like you can't go into Walmart and buy parts for a nuclear bomb. There's a reason for that, right? So there's almost like as this is unfettered and out there, and who's having access and how they having access to it, and what's their intention around it. So your thoughts on all that, and what if there not that it's awakened, but that there's something about it I think one of the things they talk about, the competitive hyper competitiveness around that may be leading us to creating a bad solution that could cost humanity something. So yeah, thoughts on that?
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's so tough to look into a crystal ball and basically say, oh yeah, no, don't worry, everything's going to be fine. I guess what I keep coming back to is I feel like any technology can be used for both good and bad. So and nuclear fission can be used to generate electricity or blow up the world, per your point. And so I do think that we should be concerned. I don't know. I guess I was a little taken back by the letter with regards to a pause, because I don't feel like I guess I don't know how that would help. It's a little unclear as to what we do when we pause, and then when do we start back up again. And you can be certain that other countries aren't going to be pausing, or the bad actors won't be pausing. So it seems kind of unrealistic. Now, you did touch on one thing with regards to Jeffrey Hinton and a lot of these other people. I think they were surprised. If I were inside their brain, but they were very surprised with regards to what like if you were to feed billions and trillions of parameters to a large language model, what we got out at the end of the day, right? I don't think anyone could have predicted sort of how good it is, right? And how it feels very authoritative, even though it makes up stuff. But it feels very authoritative, and so now it's like, well, wow, how can I do I can have even better deep fakes, right? With regards to bad and misinformation, so there's all the bad actors, but I think what I view more interesting is around the ethics and the values and the transparency, right? And I think together, we just need to be sure that we are training, whatever we're training, is actually using, as mostly unbiased data that we have, that this values sort of value what we as a human race believe in. And I think that's very squishy. So maybe that's the pause they're talking about is I think we got to get together and figure out what the hell is good and what the hell's bad in some ways.
Yeah. Well, I think they were talking about more large projects than, something where you're going in to help a company figure out their catalog. I don't think they're saying stop those things, but it's more the large projects but again, as you're right, how can they insist that everybody stop, or who's going to stop? Well, one of the points that you made in the panel that you were at, it was around regulation, and I think it was when we talked to each other, when I came up to the table. Who should be the regulators in your mind? Because you saw the other day Kamala Harris convening Google and all these technology companies, which certainly should have input into it, but it almost feels like you're setting the fox into the hen house
Uh-huh.
when you're getting those companies that are going to be making a lot of money off of it. But maybe I'm wrong about that. But who should be involved in the regulation of AI, do you believe?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I don't know. I'm not sure if I've ever seen regulation, especially on new technology, ever be quick or
Very
effective,
right. That's
right?
the
I mean,
problem. That's yeah. It takes a
yeah,
while.
it takes
Yeah.
years and even like a decade for them to finally, for the Congress to finally pass laws around, the internet, right? And so, I personally believe it needs to be driven by an industry group, which encompasses not only people that are for profits, but also institutions like educational, universities and research, right? People that are doing it not strictly for profit. And if you look at like the GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation that happened in Europe, there was a working party that they brought together. And there actually were stiff penalties for those that broke the law, right?
Yeah.
And so you can't. Number one, the government's not going to be able to understand the magnitude and the technology, because you talked about, Kamala Harris. She obviously doesn't understand the details, and nor should she. I think it's fine, but they need to be backed by people that understand the industry, experts in the space that are both for profit and nonprofit, and then actually put some teeth into it, right? If you do this and you break it,
Right.
the laws, now you're going to be fined X percentage of whatever profits came from that. So without actually having some sort of a law behind it, and it can be more or less, not so much the lawmakers need to debate on it, try and move it as quickly as possible, but I feel like you could set out some fines for people and sort of drive the behavior that you want, at least that way. And that's what happened with GDPR in Europe.
Oh, an example would be this photo or this video was produced by AI. That should be like on every one produced, right? Because then that they can't do the deep fake, and if they do, they're gonna either have prison time or fines that are gonna be make you think twice about doing it, right?
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. Because I watched a video of somebody that produced a AI character that actually the voice got through the first. Of course, it would take another layer to go get banking information, but it got through the first layer that is this the voice of the customer, right? And it folded enough that it got through that thing. So there's some concerns there, but yeah. Well, I mean, that I appreciate you sharing about that. I think that is for people that are listening and hearing the news, AI, that's what you're hearing these days is that. So it's really good to get your insight on that. Any other additional comments you want to say about any of that?
Well, I mean, I don't know. I don't know if we're going to touch on it much more, but I really like this idea of open source, right? And there was an article that came out recently it was kind of a leaked article from people at Google that was really saying, none of these companies, Google, Microsoft, OpenAI, no one has a moat really
Right. Yeah.
around
Right. I
this.
saw that too.
Yeah.
They're going to have their lunch handed to them unless they recreate their own model because if they go by the old model, the open source is going to just surpass them or something like that, right?
Yeah. I mean, I've been a huge proponent of open source since I really got into software development. And Microsoft can hire as many engineers as it wants, but it will never beat the millions of open source engineers that are out there today, right? And so what the whole story around that was there's actually already, so Facebook came out with their Llama, which is basically their version of a large language model, which is part of Meta, and it actually was leaked. And within a couple days, somebody had taken that large language model and they had it running on a little small Raspberry Pi, for example. And then a couple days later, somebody else had it running on a phone. And then all of a sudden, now they're able to retrain this model in a fraction of the time. And that would have not been able to be done within an organization. It's just the millions of people that are very motivated developers to have us keep this technology not just wrapped up in Google and Microsoft and Facebook. They actually want to have it grow in the open source community. And so, there's some really interesting stuff that's happening right now. And Google's looking around saying like, well, geez, now we're competing with everybody. And we're not even competing against just a couple of the handful of companies. Now we're competing with everybody. And so I think that's good, actually. I mean, I think it's good that in general, technology is spread out to the most farthest reaches that it possibly can, because then it's a lot more open. It's a lot more transparent as to what it's doing. It's not this mystery black box. Everyone is contributing contributing to it. And then I also think that it fosters innovation, and it actually makes a better product at the end of the day. So,
Right.
I guess that would be my stance on this, is open source is good.
Yeah, I think open source is great as well. It's awesome. Well, I appreciate. Is there any other final thoughts you would say around AI's promise, or how executives can view its potential, or anything you want to share? And also, and then following that, anything you want to promote, as what you said at the beginning, just talk a little bit about local things happening in the Twin Cities area. This is going to be broadcast everywhere, but maybe people will fly in to the Minneapolis as well. So
yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Well, I guess one thing that I would say, if you're talking, well, when I do talk to executives, is this is just another technology, right? And you need to be looking at it because your competition is doing that right now, right?
Right.
Everyone's
Exactly.
sort of looking around at it. And this idea of AI has actually been around for, I would say, more than a decade. I actually had been, take a look at Google Photos or any of these other things. It's been categorizing our photos. Years ago, I was able to take a picture of my kid, and it would be able to know and recognize his face when he was a baby, right?
Yes.
So
Exactly. Face
there's been
recognition.
narrow AI going on, right? And even reportings on like earnings calls. This is another interesting thing, and this was like back in 2015. There was a company that was actually taking a look at when publicly traded companies were reporting their earnings. It would take all that information and summarize it, basically like a chat GPT, but it was very, very narrowly focused on the financial areas. So even the areas of chatbots, Alexa, Siri, all that stuff has been around, but what happened with OpenAI and what happened with ChatGPT is now there's a way for the masses to try it out. Right.
Yes.
And so now anyone with a browser can go ahead and start typing it in. And there's definitely a hype cycle going on right now. I would say you need to be looking at this, but I also don't think that you need to be freaking out about it,
Right.
because there are a lot of places where it's being used in areas where it really doesn't make sense, yet.
Right.
But that's the way that technology evolves. People try out new things, you play around with it. And as I was saying sort of before, is if you get an opportunity to work with somebody or have somebody like myself, more than happy to talk with companies, understand what your challenges are, and see how we can apply AI to it. I actually talked to a company a couple weeks ago, and he walked me through his problem, and I said, "There's no AI here, dude." I'm like, this is just standard statistics. Like, you have all the data, you can literally create a formula for what you want to do, and this is how you do it. And so it was like, you don't need to go all the
Tell
way
the
to
way to
this,
AI. Yeah, you can
all the way
you
to
can go
AI.
too far and maybe use it where it's not the best application for it as well. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So try not to get wrapped up in the hype. And make sure that I guess the other piece that I would say is make sure you understand how your data is being used, right? If you're using an off-the-shelf system, who owns the data at the end of the day? How true is their data? You got to ask those questions. But in a lot of ways, I would say we are in a very, very early stage because it's become democratized. And it's
Yes.
become very easy for people to start working on this. So, I am very deeply involved in an artificial intelligence community here, called AppliedAI. We were started basically in 2019. And we have monthly meetups. We meet the first Thursday of every month. And we've been going for the past, 3+ years now. And we either meet in person or we meet via Zoom. When the pandemic hit, we started doing Zoom meetings, and we've been Zoom ever since. But now we're going to start meeting in person again. But I also want to have a Zoom component, as well. So, and this is one of the things that's sort of the beauty of running these communities. And with Zoom, for example, like, we had somebody from Vancouver, Washington, who basically came in and who spoke last month,
Right.
right? I would have
Right.
never had that person, be able to have that person. And he's written a whole book on AI. He's just a brilliant guy. So we'll have some in person, some people that are outside the Twin Cities. But whether you're here or not, you can always attend those, and that's at AppliedAI.mn is the website, and that's where our meetup is. You mentioned the podcast. I publish, podcast every other week on that. We have a newsletter. I know a lot of these links will show up, and then
Yes. I'll
we'll be
provide those
having,
at the bottom below
yeah.
the podcast for sure.
And then I think the other thing is doing this conference. So we will be doing a spring and a fall conference. The goal is to do that pretty much every year. We did one last fall. We just did one in the spring here, so we'll be doing one in the fall of 2023. Really the reason is things change so fast. I didn't feel like you could wait 12 months because within the next month or two, there's already some new application or some new company that's doing some space, some new things. So so look for more of that. Again, if you go to AppliedAI.mn, you should be able to see links off to everything that we have going on.
Yeah, and you have mentioned to me the conference is not just for high techies or engineers. This is for anybody that has an interest in AI, might see application for AI, just want to learn, right? So this is for even laymen can come and get value from participating.
Super accessible. Yeah. We had more than 200 people attend this conference.
Great.
And
That's great.
I tell people that the best piece of feedback that I got was, somebody came up to me at the end and they said, this is the first event I've ever attended. But I was so welcome here by everybody, so that just warmed my heart, just to hear that somebody just was like, oh, I'll just go to this conference. I don't know anybody or whatever. And for them to come up and talk to me and share that with me, that, our community is just a really, really open and welcoming community, is awesome. So that's what you can expect.
Well, this comes right back around to where we began, where you talked about the importance of community for you. And I think it's great that, this is a time post lockdowns, post COVID, it's a time to re-engage community and connectivity. And I think we all, it affected us all, being kind of disconnected from people. And so community is the place where you can reconnect, and you're providing the Applied AI community, you're providing an opportunity for people to do that and try to keep up with all the changes that are going on. So
yeah, for sure. I love it.
I appreciate you taking the time again, Justin, joining the show. And this will be, we'll probably be posting this in a couple of weeks. I'll let you know. And I want to thank everybody else that's joined in today to listen to this podcast. Thank you for coming to Unfazed Under Fire, and we'll see you here again next week. Thanks again for joining us. Have a great rest of your day.